chest up, shoulders back. This is Revival Fitness. I got out of the sauna tonight. And by the way, you can check the screen. There was this gigantic dog outside of it before I got in. I come out, I start to dry off. I get a notification on my phone from Instagram. By the way, follow me on there at Gospel of Matthew, if you're not. But on this short that I put up a little bit ago, it's also on YouTube too, I saw that JPGCoaching commented. So before we dive into this, I'm going to show the video that he commented on and go over some misconceptions about that. There's a lot of layers here we have to kind of go through, but here is the original thing that he is referring to.
This guy says, if you want a big back, stop doing these. And he shows rows and pull-ups. Then he shows lat pull-downs, the iliac fiber pull-down, a chest-supported row. And he goes into a big scientific diatribe in the caption about how pull-ups and rows are too unstable. The rows are going to involve too much of the lower back. So you think his back would look really impressive, and this is it. This is my back right here, man, and I do a lot of the basic stuff. I've never done the iliac fiber pull down. I don't know, man.
So you may have seen this video by now, and this was not something I put a ton of thought into. It's very interesting. A lot of these shorts that I will make that barely take much effort at all, I just kind of do them because I have a little bit of time, and they kind of pique my interest. They will get people very riled up. So a few misconceptions about this short with this guy named Evan in it. A lot of people are saying I insulted him, I disrespected him. Somebody said it was like disingenuous. They're like, oh, you scrolled all the way down his feed to the beginning and found a bad picture of his back. Or, oh, you did this because you hate him. It's always with these guys, man. You can't critique anybody. You think so? You think I really hate the guy? Because I made a 30-second short about him? This popped up in my feed, his short whenever he's talking about, you know, the rows and the pull-ups are not stable enough, therefore they're not optimal for hypertrophy, they're not true mass builders. But I did not even say anything bad about this guy's physique. I simply said in my short, you would expect it to look remarkably impressive. Once again, all these optimal guys, for all the knowledge that they have, you can see in my caption, this is what I go on with JPG about. Do these optimal guys, all of the science they have, these guys are writing 5-paragraph essays constantly in their own videos and comment sections explaining their tactics and their methods. Do they ever, on any level, novice guys in the gym, amateur bodybuilding, high-level bodybuilding, do these optimal guys ever have way better results than the guys that do the so-called suboptimal training? That is the question I pose in the original short. And surprise, surprise, nobody can answer it. But let's go into this exchange. JPG says, did you actually have any real counter-arguments for the points he made, or is it just look at my back? If you're going to try and take apart someone's post, at least have real evidence-based reasoning when doing so. To which I say, the question I posed is in the caption. For all the paragraphs and reasoning I see on the optimal accounts, I don't see remarkably better muscle gains at any level. This is going to get fun now. He says, Terrence Ruffin and Derek Lunsford both train optimally, in quotes. Is that enough for you? That's just a silly statement, though. Now keep this in mind, this is his definition. Training optimally is just training to maximize your growth with the most up-to-date research in conjunction with your personal training experience. So the argument that optimal training doesn't result in better growth is a contradiction. So keep that in mind. There are 3 prongs to his definition of optimal training. You want to maximize your growth, okay, with the most up-to-date research, that is the science, in conjunction with your personal training experience. We're going to go back to that. I then say, if I name 10 IFBB pros who don't train optimally, what does that mean? We can go in circles all day. The fact is, no amount of iffy exercise science proves that it's a superior method. These guys act like it is ironclad 100% true that their optimal opinion, because that's what this really comes down to is opinion, they think it's 100% fact because they can find a couple of scientific papers that allegedly prove them right. So he then replies to me and says, it proves that you don't understand how to think critically. So feel free to think how you like. And I say, you're projecting at this point, but I know your brand is tied to this stance, so I get it. And it is what it is, guys. These science dudes, you see this online all the time now. This is one of the, really, you gotta give them credit, it's one of the smartest ways to market yourself in the modern fitness space. Science, evidence, papers, research, big words. This stuff goes like hotcakes on a griddle now. And I understand it, right? We've become a much more, I don't even want to say scientifically in tune society over the past decade or so. A lot of people think they understand science, and they don't. That's encompassing of many topics, not just exercise science. That's nutrition. That's all kinds of stuff. Anything is going to work if you do it consistently enough and you recover in conjunction with it. My point is, you cannot prove, once again, this is hilarious. He says it proves I can't think critically. He can't even think beyond his own bias here. I'm saying you cannot tangibly prove that the so-called optimal methods that align with the science, which once again, if I find a scientific paper that says, hey, bend over barbell rows and do some more hypertrophy than the iliac fiber pull down or the seated machine row, what do we do then? You see what I mean? Like, we can go back and forth all day with this stuff. This is all ultimately a matter of opinion and personal preference. It's not based on tangible fact. He then says, no, you clearly just lack the ability to get past your biased definition of optimal training. I didn't even give a definition of optimal training. He did. I'm the one trying to figure out why these guys say it's so optimal when we don't really have any tangible proof that it's better than the suboptimal methods in the past or in the present day. Optimal training, by definition, is a more effective way of training than not training optimally. This is a concept I'm able to explain to children. You train children, really? And they seem to grasp it better than you are currently. Please try to broaden your perspective and then maybe we can continue this conversation. So he's trying to do the big brain thing like, oh, you don't understand, right? Until then, have a good one. Did you guys catch what just happened there? He says, optimal training by definition is a more effective way of training than not training optimally. The word of the day is tautology. Tautology, when it comes to logic and philosophy, is a statement that is necessarily true in its own right. It also can be deemed useless and pointless in repetition. Here's how he's using the tautology. He's saying this for the sake of saying it, to make himself seem smarter, even though he's pointing out very obvious stuff. That's all he did. Oh, well, the best way to do something is better than the not best way. Okay, you ready? How do you prove what is the best way? Because according to him, the research-based, evidence-based, PubMed Army stuff, that is the most optimal way to be training for muscle growth. But what if I find a pro bodybuilder, like, I don't know, cbum, right, who disagrees with that? Who is right? Who is wrong? This is not something you can prove as ironclad fact. So then I responded with this, and this was the last of the interaction. I say, so optimal means anything? Like I just said, optimal is better than not optimal. Yeah, but that varies, and what the science now might consider optimal has no tangible track record as being superior to the less optimal exercises. And this is exactly what I mean, guys. This all boils down to preference and opinion. He thinks he kind of trapped me there because he's like, oh, well, optimal's the best way. And his definition of optimal, if you remember, is up to date with the latest research and intertwined with your own experience. So he acknowledges the experience part, but he also says it needs to sway in favor of the literature, the science, whatever. So here's the question I have. If somebody gets very, very far in bodybuilding, powerlifting, whatever they're doing, let's just say bodybuilding because all this stuff always revolves around hypertrophy, okay? If somebody gets to very high levels without doing the so-called optimal methods, they do old school lifts, they do things that stress out their low back, they do things that are not that stable, whatever path you want to go down, can you really sit there and say that he has been training suboptimally the entire time? A reference I always use for this is the golden era. The guys to this day that are still idolized the most, widely agreed upon as having the most aesthetic and the physiques that most men want, if you're willing to go that far to get them. Arnold, Frank Zane, Franco Columbu, all those guys, their training predominantly revolved around the basic exercises. They did squats, and bench, and deadlifts, and bent over rows, and overhead presses and incline presses with barbells, and dumbbells, all this stuff that the modern optimal crew will wax poetic about, saying, oh, well, it's not stable enough, bro, and there's better ways to stimulate the muscle and all this other stuff. And I understand that, guys. I get it. For example, with me, I don't like to back squat anymore because it's very taxing on me. It's very fatiguing. It beats up my shoulders. That said, though, can I say 100% for everybody that they should not be back squatting? No, I can't. And furthermore, can I say that back squatting is an inferior exercise for building your legs than, say, a hack squat, a pendulum squat, all this other stuff? I can't say that. For my own experience, sure, I could be able to say that, given my leverages. Some people have injury history. However, you can find somebody with the same limb lengths and the same leverages and the same experience who's pretty much the same height and weight as you. You do a bunch of hack squats. He does a bunch of barbell back squats. You guys are probably going to have pretty similar leg development. He might even have better leg development than you. And even if you have better leg development than him, favoring the machines, he favors the free weights, that doesn't automatically mean that you can broad stroke that for every single person. And what a lot of these guys would probably argue is that, oh well, if all the old school bodybuilders, if they were doing the optimal training, they would have gotten better results. You can have that opinion once again, man, but there's no way to prove that. We can't go back in time. And even so, if we want to look at modern bodybuilders who are actively training, a lot of them still do bench and squat and deadlift. They do the unstable dumbbell shoulder press. You know, they use the big words and they think they're very intelligent. They kind of rope people in with this. I'm not saying these guys are dumb, by the way, but you need to understand they hammer on this gimmick and this kind of tactic because this is what their brand is tied to. Everybody is evidence-based, science-based, masters in this, PhD in that. Once again, even though a lot of these guys with these advanced degrees, they still can't understand and really break down research papers. All they see is the abstract. Dude, it's not hard to go on PubMed and search up something and find an abstract that agrees with you. Even though they have no idea what the methods were that were conducting this study, who the participants were, how long it went, what exactly they did, how did they measure this stuff. Guys, I have an old video. You can click on it in the top corner. I break down very briefly a completely junk study. It compares, I think, bench press and push-ups as better for chest hypertrophy. There's like 14 or 18 people in the study, all novices, very shoddy measurements. That's just one example, man. But you can find this and go up and down the list all day. There is so much variance in this data. A lot of the time, it's not even statistically significant. All the people in the study are rank novices who are going to grow doing anything. You guys see the new one now. What's it called? Lengthened partials or something. It's like, oh, we found that in novice lifters, lengthened partials produce 0.25% more. Bro, this stuff ultimately does not mean much. You can go down the list. I might have to do a video on that one of these days, like going through numerous studies and seeing the flaws in them, because they tend to be very, very flawed. That's just how it goes, man. There's not all the money in the world to fund these perfect studies and lock people in labs and observe every single thing they do, what they eat, how much they sleep, all their muscle mass beforehand, all their muscle mass after, right? It's simply not possible. They're like, we measured the mass gain in the arms with skin fold calipers. Really? So all this science and all these papers, man, they're basically just hypotheses being tested out. And you can reference them and saying, okay, this provided a little bit more muscle growth in this scenario. That's the key thing with this demographic of people, right? It really kind of snowballs when you think about it like that. So what do we ultimately have? We have the real world. All the studies, all this other stuff, man, when the rubber meets the road, it comes down to what's actually happening in the trenches in real life. A lot of bodybuilders, pro, high-ranking Olympia guys and women, a lot of them train bro style. Some of them do more power building style. Some of them do the optimal methods. But the people doing the optimal methods, by and large, are not remarkably better. They're not cleaning up. They're not winning all these classes. And on top of that, too, how do you define tangibly what is optimal and who is training optimally? So if somebody is using so-called optimal exercises, but they're using a suboptimal split, is it still optimal? If they're using optimal recovery and volume and intensity, all this other stuff, but they use old school exercises that are suboptimal for hypertrophy, you see what I mean? I'll just put it like this, man. I see a lot of teenagers in gyms that I go to. There's oftentimes two groups. The hypertrophy kids, always on the machines, doing the iliac fiber pull down, squeezing, contracting. And then there's the kids that are more athletic, maybe they're power lifters. They do the bench squat and deadlift and a couple accessories. They might even breeze through the accessories with suboptimal form. Who do you think is generally bigger and stronger? And there's a lot of factors and context here, but I think you get the point. But this has been it for me, guys. Thank you for watching. If you're looking to get some merchandise for yourself or family or friends this holiday season, you can use code LIFTIMUS at chesthairgang.com. You're going to get free shipping on all merchandise on my site. Be sure to contact me down below for direct questions about your own training and eating, as well as grab your own program. You can start making real gains in less time in the gym, yes, even with suboptimal movements, and use my codes down below to save money on other great products and services. And I will catch you guys next time.